Welcome to the Politics of Information webinar series organized by the Center for Access to Information and Justice at University of Winnipeg, featuring academics who research surveillance, data, and power in the digital age. The Center for Access to Information and Justice focuses on public interest research and the use of access to information in social science. I want to point out that the University of Winnipeg is located on Treaty 1 territory in the national homeland of the Red River Métis in Winnipeg, Manitoba. We acknowledge that these are the ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, the Anis-Innu, the Ininewak, the Nahotuak, Ochete Sakoan, Dakota Oyate, and Michif Métis peoples. Winnipeg has to do a better job of confronting colonialism, and Winnipeg has to do a better job of supporting Indigenous resurgence. Thanks to the Winnipeg event team and media team for working on the CAGE webinar series. Here's the format for today. We have 75 minutes or so. We have our speaker. We have some questions from our audience. You'll be able to pop them into the chat function there. And we will have a very informative talk from today's speaker. I'm really happy that Dr. Kelly Gates is here, Professor of Communication at University of California, San Diego. And Dr. Gates specializes in the study of surveillance, digital media, and visual culture, drawing from science and technology studies, as well as cultural and media studies. Dr. Gates is author of Our Biometric Future, Facial Recognition, Technology, and the Culture of Surveillance, NYU Press 2011, as well as the fairly new Targeted Corporations and the Police Surveillance Economy, NYU Press 2025. Thanks, Kelly, very much for being here, and the floor is yours for your presentation.
Great. Thank you so much, Professor Walby, for inviting me to be here and to speak to the group. And I'm always happy to speak to Canadians. I wish I was traveling up there, but I'm glad I'm not, because as you can see through my window in the background, the sun is shining here in San Diego. Okay, so let me get started by saying that little sort of the premise of the book and what I want to talk about today. We are living through a period of unprecedented video production and circulation. And this, what I call avalanche of video, is so all-embracing that we seldom pause to notice it. This is the way the philosopher of science Ian Hacking described what he called the avalanche of printed numbers that flooded across Europe in the 19th and early 20th centuries. The spread of bureaus that counted everything, tied to the rise of statistics and probability theory. And by borrowing his language, I mean to suggest that the avalanche of video is just as significant as the avalanche of numbers, and also similarly just as overlooked. We are only at best half conscious of the ways that video and video technologies have become embedded in institutional practices and in our perception, memory, and experience. My focus in the book Targeted and in my talk today is the avalanche of video in the domain of policing and security. So a domain of interest to this group, I assume, and one domain where this avalanche is inescapable. The mass diffusion of video cameras has mediated policing and security in whole new ways. This image on the screen here is a screenshot from the website of a startup computer vision company called Dextro. And Dextro no longer exists, but one of the use cases that they focused on when they were in operation as a way of explaining and promoting what they had to offer was security video monitoring. So I'm going to read the small print here as a way of putting a fine point on some of what I'm addressing in this book around this term, the avalanche of video. There are an estimated 30 million security cameras operating in the United States, generating an average of 4 billion hours of footage a week. Globally, there are 245 million active security cameras, but these cameras are only useful if someone watches and interprets the footage. Dextro's system turns hours of security video into meaningful data in a matter of seconds. So the big claim that this computer vision startup was making, it was far from unique in making this kind of claim or in focusing on the application of computer vision for monitoring security video. This is a screenshot from Motorola Solutions, very much still in operation. And if you notice at the bottom, it says that their vision is a screenshot from a brochure. Their vision saying is to make video monitoring obsolete, by which I believe they mean monitoring by humans. So Dextro no longer exists because it was acquired by another company, and it's that company that I'm focusing on as one of the case studies in this book. And that company is called Axon Enterprise, formerly known as Taser, maker of stun guns. And in 2017, this Taser changed its name to Axon, which was the name the company had earlier given to its police body-worn cameras. It had by then, at this time in 2017, become the leading police body camera company in the United States. That's where Axon is headquartered, but the company is extending its reach globally. And as a shout out to Canada, Axon Public Safety Canada is located in Toronto, and it's the contractor supplying the RCMP's body-worn cameras and digital evidence management system. So you can get that information at the RCMP's website. They're a little pretty transparent about who is supplying the cameras and evidence management. So there are really 3 points that I'm going to focus on, 3 things in this presentation. First of all, I want to say a little bit about Axon, a lot about it actually, but I'll have time for a little bit. And I'm arguing that it is something different than a supplier or a contractor in the way that or a vendor, the way that we've conventionally talked about the companies that do supply technologies and services to the police. They are a platform company, and they are that isn't necessarily something that they have completed a complete project, but it is in process. They are endeavoring and to build their platform out so that it reaches into all aspects of certainly criminal legal system in the US and beyond. They're not the only company operating in this space. Again, they have competitors like Motorola Solutions and other companies building out this surveillance as a service and offering platforms that will promise to replace police record management systems. Okay, so the second idea I want to discuss has to do with branding, actually. Coming from media and cultural studies, I am particularly attentive to branding, and Axon has been very successful because it isn't just embedding its technologies into policing, it's embedding its identity and interweaving its brand into law enforcement. And so there's a reason why many of us are familiar with the name of the company, and I want to kind of make the case here that it's often very underestimated, the importance of branding. Okay, and then third, I'll discuss why this company's approach to police reform, I'm sorry, police platform building, it is a kind of reform in some ways, I guess, matters for access to information and justice. Okay, so why is it important to understand Axon? Why is it important to call it a platform and not a vendor? And what does that actually mean? Let me first back up and just say that a major wave in the video avalanche came along with police adoption of body-worn cameras. As more and more cops attached cameras to their bodies and pressed record, the devices began generating massive volumes of video. And legal systems were already flooded with video before body cameras, primarily from surveillance systems, but also from cameras in proliferating forms like dash cams and drones, and of course, cell phones with video capability. But the adoption of body cameras exponentially increased the amount of video that police themselves produced. And it also required police officers to perform new types of technical and perceptual work to process the video they were producing in the course of doing their work. The initial promise that came from companies like Taser at the time and others who were entering this space of body cam, supplying body cams, was that the police body cam video could actually replace the police report. That it was a way of, saving labor, actually. This wasn't necessarily the promise of body cameras that everyone else, the general public was exposed to, but in the police circles, certainly in the conversations between law enforcement and these equipment and evidence software suppliers, they were focusing on this possibility of the body cam replacing the police report. But the reality was and is that body cameras created more work for cops, and especially more media work. So also, I'm in the book, I'm really focusing on a particular moment of change. And it happened, the moment of change that I'm focusing on for this particular case study is the moment when the company Taser became Axon. But I have to look back before that, and rewinding to 2014, this was certainly a moment when policing in the US context was seemingly in big trouble as a result of very high profile deaths by cop. The killing of Eric Garner in New York and Michael Brown in Ferguson. And, there was a real legitimation crisis happening across all of the police forces here. And for reasons that seem obvious, there were calls for more widespread deployment of body-worn cameras at that time. Even the American Civil Liberties Union was advocating this because it seemed like they would provide more accountability. Body cam video could be used to get to the truth of what happened when incidents occurred, or even better, act as a deterrent. Their very presence acting as a deterrent to the excessive use of force and other misconduct. It was around this time that we saw a steep upward climb in the rate of body camera adoption by police departments. This was thanks in part to the availability of federal funds in the US to acquire them. But just to be clear, police departments were already adopting body cameras before this. And from the perspective of the police decision makers, this was not about police accountability. Their adoption of body cameras was about gaining control of the narratives. And, others have made this argument with sound evidence like Bryce Newell and others. It was a response to the fact that more and more people were acquiring cell phones with better and better video capabilities and recording the police with those cameras and sharing those videos both online and with news media. This isn't really big news to anybody, but this is really the kind of driver that was pushing body camera adoption. The promise that the video that they would give police that would help them regain control over the narratives about police violence that they were losing in response to this kind of deep need amongst this deep social need of people to record their experience from their own perspective of policing in their communities. So by this time, Taser, the company Taser, was already the leading body cam company in the US. And they were making big claims, not only about gaining control of the narratives, that was one of them, but also that body cameras would save police departments cost by reducing complaints against the police. And here, this is a kind of screenshot that I took some time ago. I don't have the date. 2014. And, it says specifically the line items here for cost savings were legal complaints, use of force, and workers' comp reductions, officer and civilian employee savings. Can say more about that. Cost of in-house evidence management. Those were the things that they were saying, calculating into this sort of savings calculator. You could put in the number of officers in your agency and their average hourly rate, and you would, hit the calculate button, and you would find out what crazy amounts of savings you would get by adopting police body cameras and evidence.com. Not just the cameras alone. That's very important to point out, but also this return on investment ROI would require police agencies to also adopt the company's evidence management system called evidence.com. Okay, so of course, these cost and labor saving claims were a little misleading. And it was really the case that, as I mentioned before, and others have studied this to some extent, but body camera systems were creating more work for cops and more expense for police departments. Now, I mean, it's, rarely the case that new technologies actually save labor. Certainly they save time on certain kinds of tasks, but there's never less work in an absolute sense. And oftentimes, they're not taking into consideration the amount of time that it takes for people to learn the use of new software tools, to learn new procedures, and then the extra work that in this case, video management would require. This headline from a 2015 article in Computer World was refreshing to me at the time, because everyone seemed to be repeating the cost and labor saving marketing language in, where I was looking. Certainly the cost saving claims that somehow it was way more cost efficient for police to adopt body cameras, and especially to adopt cloud-based evidence management and records management systems. And, that there's a lot of reasons why I found that claim suspect, but one of them, the most obvious, being that the storage costs were set to skyrocket. As we know, video files are enormous, and police departments were now producing massive volumes of video. And for this reason, police adoption of body cameras was the major driver. I make the case in the book of pushing policing's bureaucratic systems onto these proprietary cloud-based systems. I mean, you don't want to create a whole separate siloed system for body cameras video, especially if you're hoping that it will replace the police report, or what has actually happened. It is a part of a kind of growing type of form of the police report. Okay, so for TASER, back-end video evidence management systems were a much more promising avenue for realizing their financial growth imperatives than body-worn cameras alone. And this graphic, which I believe I grabbed from a video, TASER and Axon, which is now Axon, it's really, they produce a ton of videos, promotional videos for their customers, and also videos to other kinds of audiences, videos for attracting the tech talent that they need to, help build their platform and develop their software systems and their technologies. But in any case, this graphic, I can't even find the video now. But this graphic, I like it a lot because it does this work of visualizing the role of TASER, of evidence.com, as a kind of intermediary between these technologies that appear on the left and the different aspects of the law enforcement sort of bureaucracy and law enforcement system on the right, or the criminal legal system. So on the left, you have like surveillance cameras, and you have body cameras, and you have cell phone cameras, and you have these kind of, more SLR cameras that potentially, I assume that would mean for crime scene photography. Tasers themselves, which were originally, like, the original idea, with the way that Taser got into camera development is by attaching the cameras to tasers to record tasing incidents, which were a source of major complaints against police, as you can imagine. But that didn't work out so well, and it actually wasn't a limited. They saw a greater potential, obviously, and then dash cameras and radio devices, all of that data, not just data from body cameras, that as they're envisioning it here, going into evidence.com, and then the intermediaries here being represented by these little images of a judge, maybe a prosecutor and a defense attorney, a police officer, crime scene forensics experts, and then a police chief. Okay, so evidence.com as this kind of in the cloud as the intermediary. Again, a big claim Taser was making that this would be a labor saving and cost effective. That adopting body cameras would be this, but actually they had this much bigger kind of system in mind. Okay, so the body camera was just the entry point for this company, and camera sales alone they were not going to be the source of their most significant revenues. And this was actually really pretty apparent in 2017 when Taser changed its name to Axon and adopted the brand name of their body-worn cameras. And to commemorate this change, the company staged this promotional giveaway, a free camera for every cop or every police officer in the United States for a 1 year free trial. Whether this helped them or did anything other than be a kind of stunt is hard to say. But they did this, and it was sort of there was a lot of opposition or a lot of controversy in some ways that this raised amongst the body cam companies, as you can imagine. But really, this is suggestive of a business model in a way, of an experiment in using cameras as loss leaders, a common pricing strategy where the product is sold below cost to stimulate sales of more profitable goods and services. But the strategy is different when the aim is to enroll customers in these kind of contractual subscription-based services that essentially become parts or wholes of their information management systems, the architecture of their working practices. Okay, so this is sort of suggestive of like the iPhone, that's sold below cost. We can draw parallels here but to get revenues through the back end and through other products and services that come through other directions or other market avenues. Okay, so this graph appeared in a company press release to the investor community after Axon, right around this transition from Taser to Axon. And I thought it was pretty interestingly honest about the business model, differently than, wasn't really making, if you look at the investor community documents and the communications with the investor community of these companies, there's still a lot of performative sort of claims making, but there's also, they're basically wanting to be explicit about where they see the most profitable directions of their products and services. So this graph is a illustrative graph. It's not representing anything but an illustration. It's like a market device, what economic sociologists would call a market device. They titled it Officer Safety Plan, which is the name the company gave to this package deal of equipment and software, subscription software. So the officer safety idea was obviously another selling point, aiming to appeal to police customers. It's, reminiscent of that point about reducing workers' comp costs. But I found the subheading of this graph more clarifying of the company's intent. It says revenue recognition and cash flow per officer. And that was, that suggested something to me and was clarifying about where they see cash flow and how they were aiming to make money off of their this kind of not necessarily sale of cameras, but on what I would say is the surplus labor of policing, and surplus value from the labor of policing. So this subscription package, and especially the control of access to the stored video and data, that's what promised to enable this company to realize its growth strategies. In the graph itself, I explain it at length in the chapter, but really I'll just say that in this, if you see the yellow portions of the bars in this illustrative 5-year model this is from 2018. I'm sure they would do this differently now, but the Axon cloud, this is what it represents. And so it is the most significant amount of recurring revenue or cash flow for this in this hypothetical illustrative officer safety plan graph. And it would be what the company would be sort of using in some ways to achieve this, which is their revenue, their revenues over time from until 2014, where they've crossed the $2 billion mark, it looks like. Or actually, this must be misnamed because that says to be and that says to be. So to be or not to be. That should say 3B, I guess. I actually didn't, I got this from an online financial press source, and I didn't actually put it in my notes right here. So anyway, not, I'll have to find a better graph. There's lots of them. Where does the value of a police platform come from? So this is just kind of the point, the take-home point in some ways of this chapter, or this section, I should say, because I also talk about branding, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But I'm arguing it doesn't come from technology, although that is where it's often suggested that somehow the technologies will generate value for the company, and actually a win-win in cost savings for police departments. But it's not from the technology alone, but from the labor of police officers. And this is not free labor. It's free to the company to some extent, for certainly to Axon, but it's labor paid for by cities and municipalities. And it's what we need is a graph that shows how much cities are paying, not just for adopting the cameras and the subscription services, which is costly, and storage costs are set to skyrocket and will continue to increase. But in terms of increasing cash revenue per officer, and we need to also include the labor time that is used to manage this video. Okay, so I'm going to shift now to talking about the point that I wanted to make, which I think is equally important to understand, is the way that this company is embedding its brand into the kind of identity of policing, embedding its identity, weaving its identity together with the identity of policing through branding. And okay, this is branding is how companies embed their identities into the domains they seek to capture. They're not doing anything radically different here, but there are some ways that they do it that are specific to policing, and make it uniquely worth paying attention to for those of us who are concerned with how policing is changing, how the police technoscience is changing, and giving police, and doing some of what the big claim is, which is serving as a force multiplier. Okay, so corporate branding campaigns are major sites for producing cultural imaginaries about technology, but this form of cultural production is largely ignored in debates about these technologies. It's just dismissed as irrelevant hype and as unreliable in serious social research. But really, no company recognizes the importance of cultural imaginaries about policing better than Axon. And this was very much on view in 2017 when the company rebranded itself from Taser to Axon, or the company was rebranded. I started paying attention and following this company when it was Taser. And I remember a librarian, when I was talking to her about looking for something, and I don't know how I got onto this, but she said, "Oh, they should change their name from They should change their name. It shouldn't be called Taser anymore." And I thought, that's interesting. I wonder if they will. And then lo and behold, they did not soon after that. I think there was about a 2-year period. She had a lot of foresight there. But this rebranding is really, it's everywhere. Or even the brand identity, the identity of this company is like, it's built into everything. And so that it does. And it's in their design of their headquarters. I say a lot about this in the book, in the chapter, or at least a little bit about it. There's so much more you could say about it. I'm not going to get into it too much for the sake of time. They are planning a new headquarters in Scottsdale, Arizona. This one is in Scottsdale, Arizona. This one is a rendering of what the new headquarters will look like in Scottsdale, Arizona. And the architecture is designed to make an impression, and it's not just it's for themselves, the employees, but also they host a lot of events at these. I've been to a couple of events here that they host for police decision makers, and these events have got kind of outgrown this space actually. But anyway, the architecture is designed to make an impression, and they, of course, as I keep showing this image, they have the branding is on the devices themselves that physically integrated into the devices. And this the Axon logo here is like molded into the black plastic design and imprinted on the button. This the in the middle is the button that the user presses to begin recording, and this inserts the brand onto the bodies of cops. Something I noticed a while ago when I was in New York City, when I walked into a diner or something, and there was a group of police there, and they were all wearing cameras, and it was very noticeable to me, maybe because that's what I'm looking for, but that they all had this brand that was very prominently displayed on their bodies. So physically pressing this button this is sort of design. It just struck me it was all designed to blend into the fashion style of the police uniform and into the media production practices of police work. Physically pressing the button activates the camera and by extension, the connection to the Axon platform. It's also in the software interface. I could say a lot about that, but the thing that I want to focus on is the way that what I see as one of the most significant ways that Axon is embedded its brand onto the video itself. It has embedded its brand onto the video, beginning in 2017 again. With those camera models that were released then, contained the software that, there was a tweak to that software that every recording produced by an Axon camera was imprinted with the company logo. And you can see it in the upper right-hand corner here. It's there along with the time date stamp and the camera ID number. And this really, it's not necessarily a claim of ownership, although it kind of is. It's a way of declaring the video content. It's not really the intellectual property claim so much as a way of promoting this idea that Axon is in the mediation of policing. It is embedded there. It is totally entwined there. And let me just say, the media landscape of policing is now replete with Axon branded content. And the logo appears on body cam video showing George Floyd being killed in Minneapolis and many other images. It's imprinted on a video of the man, I have it here, smashing the head of Nancy Pelosi's husband with a hammer. It's imprinted on much of the body cam video from the January 6th Capitol riot. It's imprinted on news stuff that circulates into the media, that circulates into the news. And these kind of pervasive logo memes are barely noticed and never commented on when these branded videos are reused in all these other forums. So, imprinting the logo on the body cam video fuses the Axon brand with the logistics of police perception. And the effectiveness of this fusion stems from the fact that we barely notice it, is what I point out want to point out here. Okay, so one other thing I'll say about branding is the way that this company creates, is very much in the business of producing these kind of cultural imaginaries about policing and large volumes of promotional videos to visualize the way that its technologies can be integrated into policing, and presenting us with these almost sci-fi like depictions that are idealized depictions of how the technologies will work in practice, always idealized. I feel that's certain, although I haven't asked, that most police officers, police decision makers of police of various professional levels would recognize right away that the technologies don't work quite like they are presented in these videos. But nonetheless, I think that these are powerful kinds of depictions. And so this is one that I want to kind of illustrate. And it was The one that they launched and made available at the main page of their website when they changed from Taser to Axon with this big We Are Axon campaign. And so you could use visitors to the site would be invited to watch the video, Taser, to see what, to see it. The video has the realist aesthetics of a television crime drama with high production values, visual effects, and actors playing dramatic parts. The stage scenario centered on what is known in police parlance as an active domestic. Two officers respond to a violent scene playing out in front of a suburban home. As the officers get out of their car and draw their weapons, their body cameras automatically begin capturing the unfolding incident. Body cam video appears hovering around the officers' heads, simulating its live capture. We can also see an indicator that the camera is recording. We see the same footage in another location as a split screen shows us a command center where a third man seated at a desk monitors live streams of the unfolding incident from multiple camera vantage points. After the officers intervene and arrest the man, we see one of them interacting with the victim as he holds holds her ID in a camera affixed to his eyeglasses. We see a simulation of her photo and the ID information on her document being automatically scraped off from the license. We also see her spoken words being automatically transcribed underneath the video from the officer's body camera. The domestic violence story is woven together with a promise that AI technology will allow officers to focus on people, not paperwork. The devices are presumably doing the police reporting work automatically, freeing up the officer's attention to perform care work for the victim. The message here is that AI technology will make policing more bureaucratically efficient and at the same time more humane. Ironically, more people-focused. Next, we see the footage of the incident as it circulates to the desk of a public information officer as she prepares segments of the video for release to the press. She does some quick imaging work at her computer using an automated redaction feature to blur the victims' faces. She then sends her work off to the news media, where we see the headline has changed from "More Police Brutality" to "Officers Rescue Family." And finally, we see the footage in a meeting with a public defender as he presents the evidence to the accused, who hangs his head in resignation. Presumably, he'll plead out now. The story cuts back to the two officers now fixing someone's flat tire on the side of the road. And then we see a vertical drone shot that shows us that the police car is also a sensor device emitting Axon signals to the Axon network. The perspective then zooms all the way out to a satellite view, revealing a map of a city with little yellow Axon logos scattered throughout the map, indicating dispersed locations of police activity. The map view zooms out further to reveal the Northern Hemisphere with little Axon logos visible across North America. The video ends with this visualization of a branded police media infrastructure that extends across the planet. This imaginary projection of a police media infrastructure is an example of what Bruno Latour calls a panorama, a place where the totality or the big picture is staged in bird's eye view. Latour cautions that we shouldn't take these representations too seriously, but that panoramas have to be studied carefully because they provide the only occasion to see the whole story as a whole. No matter how much they trick us, Latour writes, they prepare us for the political task ahead. Okay, so now that I've talked a bit about branding, I want to spend a few minutes talking about why this matters for access to information and justice. And I feel like one of the most obvious issues that people are certainly familiar with and is a real concern is addressed here in an op-ed piece from 2015 by Sarah Lustbader. She's a criminal defense attorney in New York. And basically, she says that they that as currently implemented, body camera programs in the United States too often fail to serve those goals because of accountability, because the police own and control the footage. She says, this is the fox guarding the hen house. That's basically the problem. And that um, she, in this piece, goes on to argue that all body cam footage from the moment it is uploaded until it is deleted should be managed by an impartial third party, either private or government run. Okay, and so here I'm very interested in this kind of belief or idea that a private party could be the third party management service that would, do the work of police accountability. I'm very skeptical of this idea. And, I think she, in fact, goes on in this piece to talk about that there are already these um, companies that are doing a lot of the third party management of the footage, even though they're not necessarily they're police customers, they're police suppliers, the police are their customers. Um, I would really want to understand better how this would actually work, a third party like Axon being the third party service provider that would do the work that police are not doing when it comes to using this video as a accountability tool or a civilian oversight tool. And okay, there's a lot we can talk about here. And I'd rather kind of leave that to discussing this in the Q&A, but it really has to do with the access to the video. And that's obviously an issue for this group and for everyone to, debate about what would that look like. After, the looking at how much Axon has, how the history of how they have uh, identified and interwoven their own identity with law enforcement and the way they do that. I don't see them pivoting to become some kind of third party that would would work independently. They're literally woven in with policing at this point. There's also another point I want to make is that about access is that they now control access to the video. They have, of course, provide the software that gives the software is where permissions about who can access the data come from, and who can, where it can be shared and so forth. That's all designed into this platform. But the point I kind of wanted to make here is that, they are eh, they acquired a company that was producing video forensic software that I was a little familiar with from another part of this research project that looks at the field of video forensics. And so they are sort of building their platform larger, and they offer a free access to a certain baseline version of the software, but there are premium versions. So this free versus premium version of access and how you would have to continue to that, law enforcement agencies and with their budgets continue to pay to access the data that they're generating, pay to access the video that they're generating. Okay, and then another point, of course, is that the video processing and analysis is being increasingly automated. And, everything that gets automated using AI is rendered more opaque and black boxed. And it's not clear how access works in those circumstances. How would access work? What does it mean to access AI, the workings of how AI is processing video and other data? Okay, so just to wrap up for now, well, I did want to make one more point before I do that. Okay, so Axon is, they're this company, they've just launched something called Axon Body Workforce. They see this as a way of extending the camera network beyond law enforcement into, well, they call it frontline workers. That's what the term that they're using, because in their targeting largely the hospital systems. But this image I thought was interesting because it looks like a bike shop to me. And why this person who works in a bike shop is a frontline worker, I don't quite understand. But it makes me think that it's just um, it's suggestive, I guess, of their aspirations to really grow their body camera platform, which will really grow the amount of video being produced and increasing the need for automation and also confounding access issues. And then, certainly in the US context, we have this problem of the formation of a new federal police force that is also adopting Axon body cameras, apparently. So if there's any lingering doubt about where body camera technologies, whether they're for police accountability, I would, think that this ICE agent wearing an Axon body camera should dispel that. So, it does seem like thanks to these tech companies, these emerging, this emerging authoritarian police force has all the tools it needs to do its work. So I'll end there and open it up for hopefully some questions and conversation about this project. Thank you. We'll leave it. I don't know if we want to leave it on this bleak image. Maybe on this one of I didn't show of the Axon CEO getting a Musk-inspired pay package. So he gets to join the billionaires club.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much for the presentation and all the insights that you shared there. If anyone in the audience has questions, you should be able to just type them into the chat or copy and paste the question into the chat. I have some questions just to start the discussion. Um, so yeah, one really insightful thing about the presentation and the book is the way you show how the brand, it's like interwoven with law enforcement now. It's interwoven with policing across North America. And do you know where Axon got that idea? Like, did they just stumble upon this, or were they trying to copy or emulate some other kind of branding strategy?
Um, I don't know where they got the branding ideas that they have, for their company. They have had a long um, history of having, since the company started, of having a kind of futuristic vision for the company and for the products and tasers, associating tasers with which are less lethal weapons. One of the things that the CEO likes to state as the goal, sort of his vision or mission when the company was Taser was he was on a mission to obsolete the bullet. And so they would make these kind of claims. But I think that the futuristic vision stems back to those earlier days before body cameras, and they were just making tasers, and tasers were also a kind of refill cartridge model sort of business plan where you deploy the tasers, but you need to get these refill cartridges once you've anybody uses them, they need to that you need to reinstall a cartridge to be able to use it again. And so, it's like the Gillette razor model in a way. But the idea, it's interesting that you asked that because if you go, when I went to these big events that they held, they were big promotional events, but they would have police chiefs come and give talks about what they had, their deployments. And um, they also would have speakers from what is called the Singularity University, which is the brainchild of Ray Kurzweil, and just this kind of Silicon Valley ethos that they they were really emulating, and they were beginning to emulate more and more. And the singularity idea is kind of wacky, but the idea of like the tech you have to adopt technologies at an increasingly fast pace if you're going to keep up, and that it is inevitable. Technological change is inevitable, and not just technological change, but exponential technological change. So there was always this branding campaign to like propel the company into the future and to say, we are the future. We are the future of policing. And if you to kind of get on board with that, or miss the boat. And that I saw that as kind of the purpose, the strategic purpose of bringing in the Singularity University speakers to talk to police chiefs, which was otherwise a weird mismatch of like the speaker versus audience, this audience with really practical needs, and these speakers who are talking about the singularity and these kind of the ideas associated with Ray Kurzweil's idea of the singularity, which essentially is like humans are going to merge into and AI are going to merge into a super intelligent life form. And it's, yeah, a lot of Silicon Valley people are totally behind it and believe it. People at Google, he was hired by Google. And so I think that that was part of it. There's a lot that, probably goes into envisioning or where they got the idea. I do think the idea for the body cameras begins with attaching cameras to tasers, because there were so many complaints about tasers. Tasers are a very risky product. Often the company developed a very powerful sort of process of going after every news story about a tasing. Certainly, if it led to a death, they wanted to make sure they challenged the idea, the kind of planting doubts that caused that the taser was ever a cause of death, and then wanting to be able to have evidence of, by attaching cameras to tasers, of the tasing incident. But then pretty quickly seeing that wasn't really much, you weren't really getting good video from that, and also wasn't settling the matter. And in addition to that, there was much more potential in cameras alone, not necessarily being attached to these devices, being attached to the bodies of cops, and that you could design the cameras to capture more that way with fish angle lenses. And of course, then you would need a back-end evidence management for that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It is just it's transformative in policing for sure, and just in a material way, not just a
Mhm.
operational way. And the other thing that your presentation made me clue in on is there was this one line about focusing on people, not paperwork. And it made me think of, in policing studies, there's a focus on policing myths and the claims that police make about keeping people safe, building community as kind of like a mythical or myth-making process. I was just wondering, in studying Axon and other parts of this network, have you learned about new myths, new policing myths that are being formed uh,
Mm.
right now?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Um, I feel like new policing myths are always being formed, but there's always a struggle over that's sort of what body cameras are in the center of, this struggle over the meaning of policing, and whether policing is public safety or is policing, occupying armies of the city. And, is policing inherently racist? Is structural racism designed into it, or are there ways to kind of transform that through, hiring practices or something like that, or other strategies, reform strategies? And then there's also the kind of defund the police arguments and the abolitionist arguments. But then on the other end of that, there is this increasingly, I don't know, there's a cultural allegiance to the police among certain groups. You see that with, with bumper stickers and various things in the United States. This kind of blue line American flag image, that, it's not something that just police will have on their cars, but others who are kind of aligning themselves with that culturally. So I do think it's always changing. There's probably a lot of things that are always remaining the same too. The myths of policing. I feel like that my point that I would make about this is just that now there is an more than ever before an effort on the part of these companies that are trying to kind of literally colonize the base, the architecture on which policing, police is policing in law enforcement and criminal legal system operates, an effort to embed themselves in the mythology of policing. That's sort of the point I was getting at about branding, that they're both creating myths, they're contributing to the creation of myths about policing, and at the same time embedding their brands there. Not all of them successfully. I just think Axon's doing this probably more so than anyone else in the US context anyway. So it's way more noticeable that they're doing it, and they're doing it they're putting more effort into it, and it appears more successful as a result. I mean, yeah, it's a good question though. Are myths of policing changing? There's always a struggle over that. I feel like, how and that battle over not just narratives about specific incidents, but about the role of policing in society there's always a struggle. There's always been a struggle, and there continues to be. So that's something very consistent, I think.
So I have a couple more questions, but we'll go to the chat and honor our audience members' questions here. So one question is, do you think that there should be more transparency on this matter and issue? Would that be beneficial, or would there be drawbacks to making things more public?
I mean, if there should be more transparency about the fact that these companies, I do think at the level of like, decisions that city councils and various other decision makers are making about um, the use of all kinds of technologies, not just police body worn cameras, but they need to, I do think there needs to be more transparency about the kinds of business models that these companies have in mind and where they see their future growth. I mean, their imperative is to grow the value of their companies. And so, where do they see that coming from? You see it in the investor communications more so than anywhere else. I don't know that they're being transparent about that enough. I mean, they have to be as publicly traded companies. So there is transparency. In some ways, I don't know if more transparency would help because you can find that information. It's just that there is so much information, and then there is this overwhelming kind of other way of framing what the technologies are useful for, especially when you just use the term public safety instead of policing and law enforcement. That right there is a way of kind of mythologizing in a certain way what it is. And certainly all over the Axon, they much prefer the term public safety. I use that term pretty heavily. But yeah, I don't know that there would be drawbacks, except that the information overload problem, that there's just so much information out there already. And there needs to be more regulation for sure, and more hesitation on the part of um, cities for continuing to, get, and certainly getting locked in. They should not have to be locked into these contractual relationships, and be much more, there needs to be much more transparency about their true costs. And that requires more understanding what the true costs are and looking at the costs beyond just the kind of pricing. So yeah, I would say it's a tricky question to answer in the sense that it's not as simple as, I don't think it's as simple as more transparency and then that's the solution. So
Next question in the chat. Uh, do these technologies, do they give officers a power over an advantage over people who are being encountered by police, people being arrested by police?
Yes. Yes. I mean, I think that I mean, they're designed to do a lot of things. It's not, and they have a lot of video has a wide ranging uses. What the promise would be, and certainly in some cases, I'm sure it works this way, where, the video evidence produced from a body worn camera or from a surveillance camera, that for that matter, or anything else, will show police wrongdoing in a way that, if it's happening, is it will be convincing. And it'll be convincing maybe in a public opinion context or in a legal context. But so, I mean, but I feel like if you look at the reasoning for the adoptions, the reason given for adoptions and the selling kind of strategies of these companies is always about the additional powers that it would give to police, the additional, um, advantage it gives them in this situation, whether it's, and even some of this is they they'll present it as, for example, now one of the things they're highlighting this company is that the cameras are being equipped with translation. So if they encounter someone who speaks a different language, they can use the camera, which is an audio recording device too, an audio device, not just a visual device, to do translation for them in that context. And so, in that sense, you'd like to see it potentially the possibility of it being helpful for the person who doesn't speak the language of a law enforcement officer. But I think by and large, the promise for police is that it will give them the evidence to show that they did not commit wrongdoing, that they're able to control the kind of narratives and control the use of the footage in a way that will be beneficial to their needs. And it's not necessary. I describe visual video forensics like this as well. It's a prosecutorial technology more so than it is you know a leveling a playing field of power between people, citizens, and people, and police. So yeah, I do think it can give the police more power. I mean, now they're talking about, integrating facial recognition and these additional capacities with the body cameras and other camera devices. And again, they sell it as a force multiplying, or and something that will make policing more efficient and effective. And I guess, in that case, at least whether it actually achieves that, we should believe that that's what they wanted to achieve. So,
Another question from an audience member in the chat. Where this audience member lives, there was a recent political debate played out in the media about whether police should be given body-worn cameras. Seemed important, and then it was just over, kind of disappeared from the news cycle. So why do you think media tends to drop the ball or lose interest in this issue?
I mean, there's just so many things for the media to cover, I guess. I mean, that's the only reason why I can give. I can't really say they do seem to have lost interest in this issue of body cam adoption. It was a very prominent topic for a while in the US, and now um, it's sort of accepted that it's been the police have adopted it and they will continue to adopt it. And I mean, my concern about that, I'm all for being able to have more evidence of police interactions if you know if and especially if there's use of violent force. But the access issues are there, and also just what is the cost of this to um cities and municipalities, And if this is just a tool of kind of more of a prosecutorial arsenal, then we're all paying for it. Like this is what we're paying for. And wouldn't it be better if we were paying for something else, other things? I feel like there's plenty of other things in the city of San Diego, for example, that I would want to be paying for other than literally, helping the CEO of Axon become a billionaire. I mean, I would really prefer to have, more affordable housing and cost effective and lots of things, better public transportation, a mitigation of homelessness. We have a huge problem with that, homelessness in California. So the media tends to lose interest because there's so many things for the media to pay attention to, and the media is, oriented towards things that have a lot of controversy around them or things that are very dramatic. And so, yeah, I don't know why in that particular case it went away, but the media lost interest, but they move on. They do. There's lots of people who study the media and study journalism that try to explain that. Now in the US, when we have major newspapers, for a while we had all of these um, such a mass shuttering of news outlets, newspaper outlets, and local newspaper outlets. And now we're even seeing, Washington Post being a major newspaper being massively just partially shut down, I should say. But I think the local news question is the most important because you do need the media lose interest because there's so many things. And if there was more professional journalists at the local level going to city council meetings and reporting on what is happening there and having some, being able to follow up with the issues that are being addressed at those meetings, I feel like that would go a long way to helping at least people be more informed. There being more of the transparency that they need to understand these. But yeah, the only reason why I can give to this is because there's not enough professional journalism for the demand of issues that are, on their plates.
I think we have time for a few more questions, and there's a couple more in the chat. And this next question is about Axon's place in international global trends. So is
Yeah.
Axon just focused on North America, or
Mhm.
are they pushing this in other countries? Are there other
Yeah.
competitors who are kind of
Yeah.
jostling for a key
Yeah.
spot?
Definitely, they're not. They're the leading body camera company. They're in major competition with other. They have lots of competitors. The one that I always refer to as Motorola Solutions. I thought it was interesting. Motorola Solutions is in some ways a larger conglomerate. And then there are companies like there are a lot of companies in the global surveillance business that are conglomerates, and Canon, which is the Japanese camera company, they own Axis Communications and another one called a company called Milestone. So Axis is a major global equipment supplier, surveillance equipment supplier, and Milestone is a video management supplier. And so there's a lot of people, there's a lot in this space, and Axon is uh, how it will all play out. They aren't a monopoly in that sense. They're, a platform is in a sense a monopoly or has a monopoly over a certain space, and that's what they want. Um, there was a major blow to their effort to build this platform when the NYPD, which is the largest police force in the United States, chose a different body camera company to be the company they were going to have their contract with. But then Axon purchased that company, acquired it, and that led to an FTC a challenge, a challenge again, because it was a violation of um, antitrust laws. But they won that challenge through. Not going to get into because it's too much for now, but and I don't have it fresh in my mind to be accurate about the details. But so Yeah, they're definitely have their sights set on being an international player. And and like I said, I mentioned at the beginning there that the Royal Canadian Mounted Police have a, contracted with Axon, and Axon has a Canadian branch of their company. So they and there are in other parts of the world too, but they are certainly competing with others, and they're not, um, they haven't won the global market for this, but they certainly would love it if they could and have their sights on that for sure. I mean, then you have to deal with it is a very complicated thing to do to have uh, police relationships, contractual relationships with government agencies in many different countries, just one country, even within the United States, they have to have the legal expertise to be designing the technologies and the procedures in a way, and the software in a way that complies with existing laws. And then when you go somewhere else, I mean, there's a whole other set of laws. And so it's not necessarily like automatic or easy, none of this. It's a very, there's all kinds of obstacles. So them achieving this aim of being a platform, which is essentially a monopoly.
There's a question that just came into the chat. I'm going to kind of reformulate it. Um, do you think
Okay.
there's something about the levels of trust in police and the levels of trust in social control agencies that has allowed this branding to really take off, that has allowed Axon to really take off?
Well, okay. I would say in the US context, and I'm sorry I can't speak to, I mean, I'm in the US, focused on the US. The trust issue, I mean, it's interesting. I think not everybody trusts the police. There's a large numbers of people who do not. And so there's no way to answer this as the trust has allowed this, in a simple sense. What I think, what I would say is, um, a series of kind of, how can I put this? It's more like a lack of trust in police is being was at a certain moment, certainly used to sell a technology that was giving the police more, what in some ways serving police needs. Um, while the kind of some of the public relations around that was that this was for police accountability, for just social justice, um, and to reestablish trusting relationships. And, the people who are arguing for the need for these um, third parties that would be the ones who would oversee and have control over police body worn camera video, they're arguing that that would provide more trust in you know instead of what we see, and it's just that they have that a lack of trust has proliferated because the police have been sort of repeatedly, police agencies have been kind of caught red-handed, not releasing video, certain video kind of disappearing. There's all kinds of incidents like this which undermined trust in the police. And so it's not that it was like the body worn camera was almost seen as like this way that trust was going to be reestablished, but what it did was proliferate the problem. It didn't solve the problem. And I don't think there's a real, I don't think there's a technological fix to the problem, certainly. Um, and so, yeah, I think is there a need if there's a need for trust in institutions that should not just be about institutions kind of promoting how trustworthy they are, or having a public relations campaign or some kind of branding campaign that shows that portrays them as such. Um, so yeah, don't know if I'm answering the question exactly, but does that does that? Is there a
Oh,
follow-up question that would help me?
no, no, for sure. Yeah, I
Okay.
think you addressed it. Bryce, if we could just have one last question to close out the panel. I have a question. In the book, there's some other chapters people will want to check out on computer vision,
Yes.
on video forensics, and you pointed to the avalanche of video data. And I'm just wondering, what do you think the next avalanche of data will be?
Hmm. I mean, I think that the next avalanche of video is it. Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, there's we're ha gonna see sort of an avalanche of generated AI generated video, right? And we're already seeing that, and it's going to complicate things a lot. I think that for video forensic specialists, which there is a chapter in this book about video forensics, and there's a chapter on the retailer Target, the US retailer Target, which is a major video surveillance kind of company and has been for decades, um, and a chapter on video AI. And I think that will be sort of the next avalanche. It's already starting to happen. And it's very confounding for those of us who are, see video offhandedly and be like, is this real? I mean, some of it's so obviously not. Then others are like, wait a minute, so is this or isn't this? And then um, I do think that video forensics professionals are particularly, especially well-trained ones, good at, there are techniques for determining if a video has been altered or an image has been altered. And it's not even that hard to determine if you have the technical knowledge that something has been altered. And in the legal system, there's chain of custody issues and things that would make it um, surprising if altered video, AI generated video ended up as like in a court in a case that um in a courtroom without someone using it to claim that it's actually real video. It could happen, certainly, especially if there isn't an equal playing field in terms of who's submitting evidence for cases. And so there was often the case in initially with the field of video forensics that it was very much the prosecutorial or if the state was bringing the case, that they had the tools that they needed for the analysis of the technical analysis, expert technical analysis of video. But if, say you were a defense attorney defending someone for whom there is evidence against the video evidence against them, they didn't have the knowledge that they needed to know the kinds of questions that they should ask. And so that created these, problems. And I think it's changed over time because there's more acknowledge or understanding that video forensics is a legitimate field and there's a lot of expertise there. I mean, it doesn't mean that there isn't falsification of evidence, both outright and unconscious. Some of that I haven't studied that at length, but you see that across all kinds of forensic expertise, the areas of expertise, fingerprinting, for example, that this kind of unconscious bias gets it's not even always outright falsification of evidence, but there is ways that people's unconscious bias ends up leading to the wrong kind of analysis that's not sound, and just appears sound because there is this expert language behind it. Um, Anyway, I think that I lost my train of where the initial question was. Sorry.
Oh,
This is me after lecturing to my, 100 students and then coming in here. But yeah, I think that what was the question initially? Can you, because I did feel like I was going
I
somewhere with
think
it.
you hit on it.
Did I hit it?
The next
Uh,
avalanche is already happening. It's the
oh, yeah,
AI videos,
AI.
and we're navigating it.
Right. And
Yeah.
you have something called the deep fake defense. I'm sure people have heard of that, where real video will be challenged. Real, actual, unaltered video will be challenged with the deep fake defense. We already saw that a few times. Some of the January 6th rioters used it. Now they're all pardoned, so I guess it didn't matter after all that. But they used it to, their lawyers used it to claim that it might be faked video, and maybe they weren't even there at the riot. Elon Musk's lawyers used it in a case against Elon Musk, saying that the video of him saying that Teslas were 100% safe, in self-driving mode, um, could have been faked, and even though it wasn't. So it's already being used. It's definitely going to create a kind of epistemic chaos,
Yeah.
and already is.
Well, thanks so much, Dr. Gates, for being here today and sharing your work. Everyone, make sure to check out Dr. Gates's new book. I want to thank the media team. Thanks, Bryce. Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone
Bryce.
in the audience for your questions and being here
Yes.
today. And hope everyone stays safe and has a good rest of the week.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Professor Welby, and everybody's questions were great. Thanks so much.
Good to chat. Okay, take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.